Hi, I'm Mark from Valor XL, and today I'd like to talk to you about something that you've certainly had to deal with in your small business or nonprofit. I'm talking about managing meetings. Now, we can't escape meetings in the business world, they're pretty much inevitable. From time to time, you probably have to convene with your team members to show them some new policy or procedure, or to go through the details of an upcoming project or program. Even if you're a sole proprietor, you may find that you have to meet with your clients or customers to discuss their business needs. Meetings are so ingrained in the whole idea of doing business that we really do take them for granted. We don't pay them as much attention as we should, and as a result, our meetings and the people who have to attend them wind up suffering. Now, I think some of that came as a result of the years during the pandemic when many businesses were operating remotely. And for the first time, we had to get used to the idea of meeting in a different way. Instead of everybody sitting down at the conference table at work, we were now dialing into a Zoom call from our own homes. It was a lot more relaxed and casual, and not at all uncommon in those days for somebody to go the entire way through a business meeting with a cat curled up on their lap. Ask me how I know. But then we came back into the office. And I think in some cases that casual attitude came along with us, and we somehow no longer took business meetings as seriously as we once had. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that they need to be stuffy and formal, but they should be structured. Meetings are something that are a tremendous benefit if they're done well, and a tremendous detriment if they're not done well. So today I'd like to share with you 5 things to keep in mind in regard to meetings, whether you are the person chairing the meeting or you're simply an attendee. I think we need to have a different perspective about how we approach meetings, and so the things we discuss today will hopefully help you to frame them in a different way that can really be a benefit to you and your organization. Number 1, determine if the meeting is really necessary. Over the past 10 years or so, there have been a variety of surveys that were conducted among employees of many different businesses in which they asked them for their candid feedback about meetings. And one of the main gripes that a lot of people had as respondents to those surveys was the fact that they said many meetings were completely unnecessary and that the information being conveyed would have really been just as effective had it come in the form of an email. So always ask yourself that if you are the person responsible for chairing meetings, should you be having it in the first place? I really encourage the owners and operators of small businesses and nonprofits to think in these terms. We tend to believe that meetings are something completely free. It's an internal event that doesn't require anything or anyone else, but they're not free. Every meeting that we conduct does have a price tag attached to it, because all the people attending that meeting are there instead of performing their regular job function, and yet we are still paying them. So really, that is all non-productive time for everybody at that meeting. Keep that in mind as a determination factor when you're trying to decide whether or not you should schedule a meeting. Would it be a better use of time and resources to simply email the information out to everybody and then have a follow-up if there are questions or something that needs clarification? Don't automatically assume that the meeting should occur, and don't get in the habit of obligatory meetings. A meeting that we have every Monday might be good. A meeting that we have every other Monday might be just as effective. Gauge things, because meetings are always about the circumstances of our business, and our businesses change. It may be imperative to have a weekly meeting at one juncture, but you may be able to get by with meeting just once a month a little bit later on. Always be vigilant about that, because meetings can turn into overkill if they're not truly needed. Number 2, don't turn a meeting into a presentation. One of the worst things you can do if you're the chair of a meeting is to stand up and simply talk for 60 minutes and then tell everybody, okay, we're done. That's not really a meeting. That is a presentation. Now, there certainly are times to do presentations. Maybe you're at a board meeting where you need to give a fiscal year-end recap to every member of the board, Or maybe you're in some sort of a community-facing forum where you're trying to illustrate the mission and the purpose of your organization. Certainly, in that kind of a setting, be presentational. But if you're meeting with your team members, if it's really intended to be a meeting, then let it be a meeting. Let it be collaborative. Allow there to be opportunity for people to have input, to ask questions. If you simply talk and don't let anyone else interject, you'll hold their attention for about 5 minutes, and then you'll start to see people on their phones or doodling on a notepad. It's not realistic to expect an endless attention span, so be very cautious about how long you continue, and that can even hold true if it's just someone else speaking who takes 15 minutes to say something that probably could have been said in 2. It may seem basic, but it really is one of those areas where you can rein everything in and help your meetings to run much more smoothly and effectively. Number 3, always have an agenda to guide the meeting. Now, agendas can take a lot of different forms. It can be simple high-level bullet points, or it can be extremely detailed documentation. But the good thing about an agenda is it sets a proper expectation for the meeting attendees. And ideally, you should distribute an agenda prior to the meeting so that people know what to expect. If you're conducting a longer meeting, particularly one that will run on for several hours, you do need to schedule periodic breaks, lunches if necessary. Communicate those time frames in the agenda so that you eliminate any question. If you can do that, you can keep a very structured format to operate within. That can also be a good benchmark for you to know whether or not you're slipping a little bit behind. If you have a certain amount of material that you need to cover, you need a way to determine whether or not you're staying on course. Agendas can be a fantastic tool for doing that because you can know right away whether or not you are meeting each one of those benchmarks as you move through. If you don't use an agenda, you're keeping things so open-ended that you probably will forget things, you'll probably overlook things, and you definitely won't have the same concise kind of structure to what you're presenting. Number 4, keep the focus of the meeting on topic, and this can be a tricky one. This does tie in very much with using an agenda, and it really also does come down to really exercising some real-time editing ability. You need to be able to clearly understand if something starts to drift. Sometimes a meeting can begin, and for 10 or 15 minutes, it's very focused, and then suddenly one of the participants interjects something completely unrelated. Others join in, and before you know it, it's like you're at a whole different meeting. That's what I call hijacking a meeting, and that can really be counterproductive. It can be extremely difficult to come back on track once something like that happens. Remember, if you are the chair of that meeting, you get to decide why you're meeting. You get to determine the topic, and you get to present to whoever is there whatever it is that you feel is relevant. Now, part of keeping people on topic is also being able to present them with printed materials to go over. But I caution you with this. One thing you absolutely don't want to do is take printed materials in a meeting and read through all of them verbatim. You will immediately alienate everybody at the meeting because it's very demeaning to hand someone something to read and then you read every word out loud yourself, somehow implying that they're not capable of reading and disseminating what you gave them. It's a happy medium in there that you have to really strive for, but it's all about keeping the focus where it needs to be. If you've determined that it's important enough to meet, then determine that you have to be very focused and very intentional about presenting specifically what it is that you wanted to discuss. And number 5, always use proper time management skills. This is perhaps the most important one of all, and it really covers a wide spectrum. If you're the chair of a meeting that is supposed to start at 11 o'clock, please don't show up at 11:10. When that happens, you've already lost your audience. You've already lost the participation of your team. What it boils down to is you're setting a terrible precedent and you're showing that obviously the meeting isn't all that important. Had it been, you would have shown up on time. If you roll in late, then you'll find yourself scurrying around trying to make up for lost time. You're starting the meeting already behind the 8 ball. If you have a solid 60 minutes worth of material to cover, you now have to somehow try to do that in 50 minutes. It's a terrible way to do things, and you'll never get real engagement because you'll be frustrated, the people at the meeting will be frustrated, and the net result will be something much less than what you were hoping for. Time management also is about respecting other people's time. And remember that there could be situations where someone in attendance at your meeting is there because they made a personal sacrifice to be there. They may have rearranged their schedule for the entire day to accommodate your meeting. So be sure you start on time and be sure that you end on time. And within the meeting itself, be sure that you really are keeping track of how things are playing out. And like we said earlier, there can be instances where somebody commandeers the meeting and suddenly talks for 15 minutes. Don't allow that to happen. Build in an opportunity for everybody who wants to participate to do so, but never create a scenario where somebody is enabled to use up an inordinate amount of time. It won't do you any favors for keeping the context of the meeting there. It's really important to ensure that you remain in charge, and I encourage you, if you don't manage meetings, meetings will manage you. You will lose control, it will slip out of your fingers, and it will turn into a chaotic mess. Now, there are times for open-ended meetings. If you want to have a brainstorming session where it literally is bring any idea you want to the table and people are throwing things out there for the sake of collaboration, that's great. But if you have a specific topic that you want to talk about, if you want to have a focused discussion, you can only do that if you manage the time properly. Really, out of all of these 5, this is the most important, because even if you adhere to the others, if you're sloppy when it comes to managing time, nothing will work the way that it should. I hope that these 5 have given you some food for thought. When you're chairing a meeting, one important thing to remember is that meeting is actually one of the most incredible tools your organization will ever have, because it's an opportunity for everybody on your team to collaboratively come together. They're all bringing their individual experience, their expertise, their ideas, their creativity, their concerns, their questions. And that can stimulate amazing conversation that will not only address whatever the subject of the meeting was, but you can sometimes end up solving long-term problems because you're now addressing them in that group setting. Don't let that fall by the wayside. Meetings are something that, if utilized properly, can yield tremendous rewards. So take the time to be intentional and conscientious about how you conduct meetings, and it will always pay off. I really appreciate you joining me today. At Valor XL, the goal of everything that we do is to help you to move as quickly as you possibly can toward a really thriving environment for your small business or your nonprofit. But how do you know if you're even on a good trajectory? If you click on the link in the description below this video, you can download a free PDF called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. It takes only a couple of minutes to work through, and when you're done, you'll have a good insight as to whether or not you're taking an approach that is inactive, reactive, or proactive. If this video was helpful for you, please give us a like, and in the comments below, let me know what are the challenges you have faced in your organization when it comes to conducting meetings. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to the Valor XL channel. We have new content on a regular basis, all of it specifically tailored for small businesses and nonprofits. I really appreciate you joining me today. I invite you to come back again next time, and until then, goodbye for now.